Well, for someone who was born in China and looking from an outsider's perspective, I feel what inspires me the most about Western civilization is individual liberty and reason. Because this is something that, after living under a totalitarian regime for 13 years, what I realized it was lacking in the education. And it's not because Chinese civilization did not have these aspects. It's because our culture was unfortunately destroyed by the Cultural Revolution by Communist Party. And after coming to the West, what really moved me is that I realized the idea of Christianity is embedded in your law, in your tradition, in your culture, in everything. Maybe Westerners don't feel the presence of it and the benefit of it in the moral ethics, in your way of looking at life. And at the same time, with the connection to God, which you preserved, there's also that aspect of enlightenment ideal, which is daring to know, daring to try and exercise your individual wisdom to find that connection with God. And that journey itself, I think it's preserved because Western civilization has that foundation for individual to achieve their highest potential through these methods, these tradition. And I think that is the achievement of Western civilization that inspires me the most. Well, I think for someone who has lived in a free society all their life, sometimes they take these freedom for granted. The freedom to explore the world in the way that they want to. And they're not going to be suppressed, their nature, their individuality, their uniqueness is not suppressed. And all of this is not a privilege that everyone in the world enjoys. Right now, what I see in the world is in the Western free nations that individuals, young people, have these privileges. And I think that is something perhaps it will take a Western youth to learn about totalitarian regime, to learn about the lives under communism, under socialism, to understand why that in the West we have prosperity, we have innovation. So a lot of the freedom that they enjoy, for example, freedom to speak up their own mind, freedom to even access social media, the freedom to oppose their professor in a classroom, the freedom to assemble, to march on the street about what they believe in. These things not everybody around the world enjoys. While we complain about our own system, I think it's really beneficial to take a comparative view on what the outside world is living under. And I think that will make them treasure this environment a lot more. I think observing what's happening on university campuses is a very good example. In where I used to live in China, there is no freedom to debate. You cannot go up against someone who has a different opinion from you and to present your opinion, to go through a debate, to reaffirm your own stand and to refine your position. I think that is something that builds the human character and it strengthens the root of your belief. It sort of builds your moral standing in some way. But what I'm seeing on campuses is that a lot of debates are being stifled because they're being labeled as this and that. And this is similar to back in Cultural Revolution when the Red Guard have go up to their professors and label them as anti-revolutionary. And that label alone has stifled all conversations. The final aim for this kind of passive-aggressive rhetoric is conformity, is absolute conformity. This is not something that they want to stimulate debate and independent thinking. They don't want to exchange ideas. Now, I think it is important that we value our academic freedom of what got us here. That is very valuable to preserve. Well, I wish they can Because since 2013, the Chinese government has starting to ban the talk of Western democracy, democratic value in Chinese schools. So from the classroom, Chinese youth do not have the chance to familiarize themselves with it. And of course, certain books are also banned. If they want to, there are books that they can get, but the thing about communist education is that even a lot of the classical texts are manipulated and sometimes edited for the regime to gain control over the minds of people. I do hope that the Chinese youth will have a chance to come to the West. For example, we have so many Chinese students in Australian universities. To be here in the land of freedom is a privilege, but it's also a responsibility. It gives them the chance to learn, to open their eyes. But sometimes it does take a lot of courage to take that step, to get out of your comfort zone, to learn something that since you were young, it was been told to you as hostile and subversive. So, and there is another reason why Communist Party would look at Western democratic value as a fundamental threat, because it enables individual thinking. And when people are able to think for themselves, they're harder to enslave. So I do think that based on human nature, everyone would like to know about the value of freedom, individual liberty. So I would think Chinese youth are the same. Well, I think it is very beneficial for everybody to get to know different civilizations and compare different philosophies. Now, for my own spiritual journey and experience in refining my own thoughts and ideas, I oftentimes draw inspiration from the Bible, from Socrates' idea. And I remember comparing the Chinese Buddhist spiritual tradition in the believing in enlightened beings, which is called Buddha, and also Western tradition of believing the one and only God. And yet you can, through faith, refine yourself. And also Plato's idea, where he gave the analogy in Allegory of Cave, which is the form, the eternal truth. There are universality in all of these philosophies, and there are differences. And then sometimes I find that approaching it from the Western way, it helped me to even understand my own culture a bit better. So I think it definitely broadened one's horizon and make one more aware of where people come from. Well, I have to say at this very moment, The Republic by Plato. I remember when I was reading it, I was in college and I was going through a very difficult process because in the first 13 years of my life, I lived under communism and received a lot of indoctrination. And one thing that is sort of becoming more and more like I would become more and more aware about is how I often rely on ideology and my teacher and the government's thinking for me, and so that I don't have to take responsibility for my own action. It's a relief in some way because you don't feel the weight of your individual decision, but at the same time, you never get to live authentic life. And I remember back in university, I was reading The Republic, and Plato described three kind of people. So the top class in the Republic is the gold people who are guided by reason, and then then comes the silver, which is guided by honor and glory. And then I suddenly realized in the past, a lot of the patriotic thinking, a lot of the enthusiasm about China, the nationalistic sort of point of view, and even defending communists as if I were defending my own culture, comes from mostly passion and the sense of honor and glory, but not from a place of wisdom and reason. And I think my favorite allegory in the world is the allegory of the cave, where Socrates described this process of a man who lived in a cave and seeing only shadows on the wall and never being able to see the truth in the world. And what he described, which is really moving, is when that person was loosened of his bound and be able to see that the shadow on the wall was projected by the fire behind him. And that's partial truth. But even that, it took so long for him just to recognize that part of the truth, to be able to comprehend it, and to put it in his mind that perhaps what he saw all his life was not the real truth, and there's a higher power. And then Socrates described this process of this man being dragged from the bottom of the cave to the outside world, the trouble, the struggle that he's gone through, the ability for him, the struggle he's gone through to be able to use his limbs again, to walk, and to exercise his own reason, to his own wisdom, and to comprehend the world. I think it's at that moment that I realized there is this no safe net for me to fall back on. Ideology, propaganda, a certain rhetoric by the government is not going to prevent me from, it's preventing me from becoming a full individual. Only when I have the courage to exercise all my faculties, only then I become an authentic, true person, living to the best of my ability and potential. It's scary because you have to take responsibility for your own action. And you can't blame no one for the things you do. But at the same time, it's really empowering. So I think from then, I've been on this journey of reviewing my way of going through life and pausing occasionally to see if my impulses and my behavior, where the source is. Is it from my own reason, from what I want to be, who I truly am? Or is it from the outside world's influence? So I would say The Republic is the book that has changed my life.